This is CNN Breaking News.
Hello, everyone. I'm Frederica Whitfield in New York. Ana Cabrera has the day off. A single decision, a single vote, and a seismic shift in the nation's legal and cultural landscape. Crowds have been gathering outside the U.S. Supreme Court after a majority, 5 justices, overturned the landmark Roe v. Wade decision. That means that after nearly 50 years, American women no longer have a constitutional right to an abortion. States will now define abortion laws, and 13 states have abortion bans that were triggered into law by this morning's ruling. In all, about half the states in this country are expected to implement abortion bans. It's a monumental victory for abortion opponents and conservatives, but many liberals and moderates fear that the court could target other landmark precedents like same-sex marriage and contraception. Justice Clarence Thomas explicitly called for those cases to be revisited. He wrote today, "For that reason, in future cases, we should reconsider all of this court's substantive due process precedents, including Griswold, Lawrence, and Obergefell. Because any substantive due process decision is demonstrably erroneous, we have a duty to correct the error established in those precedents." CNN's Jessica Schneider is outside the U.S. Supreme Court. Caitlin Collins is at the White House, and Lauren Fox is on Capitol Hill. To you first, Caitlin. The president just spoke. He did not mince words, saying this is a sad day for the court and the country. What else did he say?
He called it a solemn day for the United States and said that the Supreme Court did not simply limit the constitutional right to get an abortion. They completely overturned the ruling, Roe versus Wade, saying that they completely took it away in these arguments. And he was talking about what a solemn day he believes it is for America. And for a president who doesn't often invoke his predecessor, he did by name just now, saying that it was the addition of those 3 Supreme Court justices who were appointed by former President Trump that factored in such a major way into today's decision by the court to overturn Roe versus Wade. And he noted the fact that there have been Supreme Court justices who were appointed by both Democratic and Republican presidents who maintained this decision and upheld it for so long. And he talked about what the consequences of what today's decision means for Americans.
State laws banning abortion are automatically taking effect today, jeopardizing the health of millions of women, some without exceptions. So extreme that women could be punished for protecting their health. So extreme that women and girls were forced to bear their rapist's child. With the child, a consequence. It just stuns me.
The president there at a loss of words for a moment as he was talking about what this decision means. He also talked about how the White House and his administration is going to respond, and he said the Justice Department will be ready to have legal challenges for any states or state officials that try to limit women who try to travel out of state if they can't get an abortion in their home state to another state. He talked about efforts to eliminate barriers to that abortion medication, of course, that the White House has talked about. It's really been a ruling that they've been bracing for so many months. But at the end, of course, the president noted how limited he is in executive actions he can take. Of course, no executive action he can take will undo what happened with the Supreme Court today. And so for that matter, he called on Americans to elect more pro-choice Democrats this November in the midterm elections, saying that he does believe Roe versus Wade is on the ballot come November.
Caitlin, thank you. And Jessica, this may be the most life-changing decision from the court in decades. So what more are you learning about the ruling?
That's right, Frederica. Life-changing for millions of American women, but also the most consequential decision from the Supreme Court in decades, just about 50 years. The court here eliminating the constitutional right to an abortion, something that they established way back in 1973. And this gives all the power to the individual states. They will be able to determine abortion rights for the women in their states. And the changes are set to come, as the president said, almost immediately. More than 24 states are poised to almost immediately ban abortion. Now, this was a 5-4 decision. It was fairly identical to the leaked draft that we saw just about a month and a half ago. This was authored by Justice Alito. Now, crucially, the Chief Justice, John Roberts, he did not want to go so far as overturning Roe v. Wade, though he said that he will vote to uphold the Mississippi 15-week abortion ban. But still, the consequence is that Roe v. Wade is overturned because of these 5 conservative justices. Here's something from Justice Alito's opinion. He called Roe v. Wade egregiously wrong from the start. He said its reasoning was exceptionally weak, and the decision has had damaging consequences. And far from bringing about a national settlement of the abortion issue, Roe and Casey have inflamed debate and deepened division. Now, the dissent here also responded with a very curt joint response from the 3 liberal justices, Justice Stephen Breyer, of course, he's retiring soon, and Justices Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan, writing this: whatever the exact scope of the coming laws that are set to come in the individual states, one result of today's decision is certain: the curtailment of a women's rights and of their status as free and equal citizens. So, Frederica, this opinion not only dividing the nation, but also dividing this court, this conservative majority really flexing its muscle in the past few days in particular, and today overturning Roe v. Wade, leaving it all to the states. Frederica?
All right, thank you, Jessica. Lauren, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi was very somber. What does she have to say?
Well, she started her press conference saying that she wasn't even going to say good morning because it was not, in her view, a good morning. She was visibly upset, stunned by the decision, she said. Here's more about what she had to say in that press conference.
What is happening here? What is happening here? A woman's fundamental health decisions are her own to make in consultation with her doctor, her faith, her family, not some right-wing politicians. But to see the Chief Justice side with this radical agenda, it's just stunning. And again, as a woman, as a mother, as a grandmother, to see young girls now have fewer rights than their moms or even their grandmothers is something very sad. If you're a woman, if you care about women, if you respect women, you know that this is a disgraceful judgment that they made.
And I also spoke to 2 other Democrats this morning. Senator Chris Coons told me that, this decision today really took out the goodwill that senators and that bipartisan group that had passed that gun safety legislation last night, that they had felt for one another. He said that this decision really totally changed the dynamics of how the Senate is feeling this morning and this afternoon. It just goes to show you that lawmakers still trying to take this information in, Republicans obviously celebrating this decision, Democrats saying that they are going to make this the campaign issue going into the midterm elections. Frederica?
All right. Lauren Fox, Caitlin Collins, Jessica Schneider, thanks to all of you. Appreciate it. Let's talk more about all of this. Let's bring in CNN senior legal analyst Laura Coates, constitutional law professor and author of She Took Justice, Gloria Brown Marshall, and CNN chief legal analyst Jeffrey Toobin. Good to see all of you. Jeffrey, the president said this is not over. He says, however, it is up to Congress to restore Roe v. Wade as federal law. We know that recently they tried to codify it. It didn't work. So what are the options?
No, they're not a lot for the federal government. They can protect the right to travel. They can protect the ability to mail abortion pills through the mail. But, this really is going to be a state-by-state fight, and it's also going to be a fight in the Supreme Court about other rights. Because remember, what the court said, what Justice Alito said in the opinion is there is nothing, the Constitution says nothing about abortion. It doesn't mention abortion in the Constitution. It also doesn't mention same-sex marriage. It also doesn't mention contraception. It also doesn't mention consensual sex. And in Justice Thomas's opinion, he says the court should revisit, that is, overturn the decisions that prevent states from limiting contraception, same-sex marriage, consensual sex. So, the opportunity for change here is all on the right. All the left can do is play defense best as can, state by state.
Justice Thomas signposting what possibly is ahead, foreshadowing. So, Laura, you know, in the Plessy versus Ferguson ruling, there was an expansion of rights. This is a right now that has been taken away. That is unprecedented. How has this happened when, for 50 years, Roe v. Wade has been upheld as constitutional a dozen times?
What's so important to think about is I woke up this morning, as millions of women across this country, with certain rights. I will go to bed with less rights than my grandmother had in her lifetime, than my great-grandmother had in her lifetime. This is one of the first instances I can think of when the Supreme Court has taken away rights that not only have been reinvested in, that people have relied upon, that has been based and also upheld over successive generations for 50 years. And you cannot overstate this principle enough. The real reason that the majority opinion found for this no longer to be a viable right is because it was not part of a long-standing or rooted in our history of our nation. Let's just go back for a second here on the Constitution. A lot of things have not been rooted in our nation's history that ought to have been codified then and later on were enveloped into our society. The idea that all the different rights that are a part of the same notion, fundamental rights as Jeffrey talked about, same-sex marriage, interracial marriage, the opportunity to be in a same-sex relationship, the ideas of contraceptives, all of those things are not rooted in our nation's long history, according to this majority opinion, and they want to carve that out and say, we're not talking about those things, this is just about this. The Supreme Court ought to know better than any other entity in the entire world about the problems of a slippery slope. And though they want to wall off just abortion rights in this country and ignore other things based on the same premise, they will not be able to do so. And I remind everyone, the Supreme Court has already been a part of its own delegitimization here when they allowed Texas to do an end run around their precedent and thumb their nose at the Supreme Court and said, I don't care what precedent you have, we're going to codify something anyway. Well, the Supreme Court now has essentially said our precedent is no longer going to be the end all be all. As the majority said, stare decisis will not be a straitjacket, but apparently it's not for everything, just what they want to carve out.
Professor Brown Marshall, I mean, this ruling allows states now to decide abortion rights or restrictions. 13 states have abortion-related laws now immediately triggered into effect. So what does this mean for women, for families? What does tomorrow look like? Just as Laura said, you know, today, this morning, it's one picture, this evening it's another. But for tomorrow, for those who are making plans, what does it potentially look like?
We don't know, and that's the problem. The Supreme Court is supposed to give clarity to the country. When there are conflicts in the circuits, when there are issues that come before the Supreme Court, they take so few cases in order to give clarity to the country. This gives no clarity. On the one hand, the New York case revolving guns says that the state cannot decide who can conceal a weapon and carry it outside. And then it turns on the other hand and says, oh, you leave this to the legislative body and women have political power. And so therefore use that political power to lobby your legislative body and get them to say that it's all right for you to have access to abortion. So as was pointed out, we don't know, since abortion, anti-abortion leaders have said this is just the first step. They've already said they're going to go into each state and make sure step by step that they're going to take away abortion rights altogether. So I think this is the beginning of the end for many, but it's also, and one last thing, going back to what was said with Laura and the history, when we look at the history and they put forward these statutes from the 1800s of women who were denied abortion rights, these statutes came at a time of nationalism. And that's what we're in right now. We're in a period of nationalism in which every white baby counts because they're not thinking about the people of color. They're thinking about population growth, knowing that by the year 2045, this country is going to be majority people of color. So there are underlying conservative issues here that are not being discussed that need to be when it comes to this decision.
And Jeffrey, I mean, this is a victory for activists, politicians who've been trying to overturn this for decades, who have fought, through state legislation to chip away at Roe versus Wade. I mean, so what does this say about the power of this movement, especially this morning? There are a lot of people who are feeling like this came so suddenly and abruptly, but really it has been going on for decades to get this result.
And this was something Donald Trump recognized when he ran for president. He said over and over again, he said in one of his debates with Hillary Clinton, if I win, I will appoint justices who will vote to overturn Roe versus Wade. And conservatives who didn't like Donald Trump's personal life, who didn't like his demeanor, who didn't like, the way he's conducted himself in all his marriages, they said, no, this is what matters to us. That's why we're going to support him. The evangelical community was very strongly supportive of Donald Trump throughout his presidency.
Overlook the other stuff.
And they got what they wanted. And, there's a lesson here that the Supreme Court is on the ballot every time you vote for president, every time you vote for senators who vote to confirm Supreme Court justices. So, maybe Democrats will learn the significance. That is not something that's been a big motivating factor for Democratic voters. It has been one for Republican voters, and they got what they wanted today.
And as we're talking, the images right outside the Supreme Court, the crowd getting louder, getting bigger. Laura, in the recent confirmation hearings, we heard Justices Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, Coney Barrett all state the values of stare decisis, the precedent of Roe versus Wade, and now those very justices joined a majority to overturn it. So does this devalue the confirmation process?
Yes, I think it points out the fact that it is theirs to lose, and all they have to do is say the right things long enough to a particular audience to get that confirmation to then be called justice, and then to do what they'd like after that. I'd note that in the concurring opinion written by Justice Brett Kavanaugh, he really focused in on this notion of stare decisis, and in a way, I think, trying to point out the fact that he anticipated we'd have this very conversation today, Fred. The idea of, I thought you all said you believed in the value of things, but I go back to that majority opinion written by Alito to suggest, hey, these are not straitjackets, and we can divert from it many different times. Plessy versus Ferguson on one hand, as one example they've raised. But I'll note there's a really great quote that the dissenting opinions wrote about this issue, pointing out the hypocrisy of part of these things and the idea of compartmentalizing this notion. And what they essentially say is either the majority does not really believe in its own reasoning, or if it does, all rights that have no history stretching back to the mid-19th century are insecure. Either the mass of the majority's opinion is hypocrisy, or additional constitutional rights are under threat. It is one or the other. And Fred, today, both cannot be true. You cannot, on the one hand, say, if there is no mention in the Constitution or no long-standing nod in history, then it cannot be honored. And then say, but everything else outside of that same rationale can be. Either you're a hypocrite or you are ignoring it. Either you believe in stare decisis or you just wanted to be called a justice in the end.
All right, we'll leave it there for now. Thanks to everybody. Appreciate it. Laura Coates, Professor Gloria Browne-Marshall, and Jeffrey Toobin. Laura, I'll see you again in a few minutes. Thank you so much. Also, still ahead, Democratic Senator Amy Klobuchar from the Judiciary Committee joining us. We'll get her take on this history-making day in America, the U.S. Supreme Court overturning Roe versus Wade.
At CNN, we see the devastation caused by natural disasters, famine, and war. We also see how the generosity of others can change lives. You and CNN's Impact Your World can help. Reputable charities that are checked out by CNN. See the difference it makes when you give time, share stories, or donate. By just clicking the button, be a part of the solution. Impact Your World.
get daily news updates in your inbox, sign up for the CNN newsletter. Coronavirus, fact versus fiction.
I'm Jim Bitterman in Paris, and this is CNN.
Coronavirus. To get daily news updates in your inbox, sign up for the CNN newsletter. Coronavirus, fact versus fiction.
To open doors, to develop contacts, and to unlock secrets, it takes trust.
It was the first time he really came out of his shell in front of a camera.
Trust that you'll listen.
It's so great that you're here today. It just highlights what's making a difference.
That you'll be honest.
I don't want to pry, but what sort of conversations do you have with them?
Trust that you'll be accurate and you'll be fair.
It was an unprecedented move. Very eerie. All the roads have been closed off.
Describe the scene that you arrived to. The Apache attack helicopter.
This is what Captain Wales has been flying.
Do you want talks with them?
What is the point of talking now?
Huge amounts of police support coming into this protest.
We continue to monitor the government in crisis.
This was the Duchess's first news interview.
Rare access indeed. That's what it's all about.
Max Foster, CNN.
This is CNN. More people get their news from CNN than any other news source.
All right, happening right now, the House is voting on the historic bipartisan gun control bill negotiated and passed by the U.S. Senate. There is no doubt this bill will be approved since Democrats have control of the House. But we are also watching how many Republicans end up supporting the legislation. So far, at least 7 have, including Congresswoman Liz Cheney. We'll let you know as soon as the vote is finished. All right, meanwhile, it's only been a matter of hours since the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade. And some states are already enacting abortion laws and bans. 13 states have trigger bans or trigger laws to ban abortion as soon as the U.S. Supreme Court issued its ruling. Missouri's Attorney General says he signed an opinion moments after the decision that will, quote, effectively end abortion in the state. Louisiana's Attorney General saying, quote, "This is the day the Lord has made. I rejoice with my departed mom and the unborn children with her in heaven." The Texas Attorney General says he is making today an annual holiday. CNN's Tom Foreman joining us right now. So, Tom, what more do we know about the trigger bans and how states are reacting?
As you noted, 13 states, Frederica, had so-called trigger laws in place for this day, meaning abortion bans that are going into effect very quickly, according to the abortion rights group, the Guttmacher Institute. In Kentucky, Louisiana, and South Dakota, for example, the laws said it would happen immediately, so barring some issue somewhere there, those are all in effect now. At the next level, abortion bans are to be enforced 30 days from now in Idaho, Texas, and Tennessee, although there is a push in Texas to bypass that delay and implement a ban even sooner. This whole map, all of this is changing very rapidly. Then we have a half dozen states where officials need to certify their legislation is legally valid before the ban kicks in. Arkansas, Mississippi, Missouri, North Dakota, Oklahoma, Utah, and Wyoming. And as you noted, Missouri already jumped on it, certified, and others are moving very rapidly in that direction, making their bans almost immediate, as we mentioned the other one. So it could be just hours or days until all of those are done. And finally, we can add in the states that have old unenforced abortion bans, which now can be enforced, states that passed bans under Roe, which were blocked by courts. Altogether, you get a whopping 26 states certain or likely to ban abortion. We say likely because there are places such as Montana where a state Supreme Court ruling is, for now, still in the way. That's compared to just 16 states and D.C. with laws to protect abortion rights, states which are now preparing for an influx of patients crossing state lines to seek care. So how severe are these new laws? Missouri has eyes on targeting even non-residents who might pass through and conceive a child in their state, and if that person were to get an abortion elsewhere, they could pursue them legally. Oklahoma passed a law just this year to ban abortion from the moment of fertilization. Texas and some other states want abortion illegal after just 6 weeks, when many women may not even know that they are pregnant. Conservative lawmakers in several states have embraced the idea that there should be no exception for rape or incest, and almost all these laws carry stiff penalties for medical professionals caught providing abortion services. Tens of thousands of dollars in fines, loss of their licenses, and potentially years in prison. Frederica?
All right. Tom, thank you so much. All right, let's continue this discussion right now. I want to bring in Senator Amy Klobuchar. She's a Democrat from Minnesota and sits on the Judiciary Committee. Senator, good to see you. So, Roe versus Wade. It's the law that you grew up knowing. How does the overturning of it make you feel today?
50 years of precedent, Frederica. I'm someone that believes in the law, believes in the court, and they literally flipped it on its head, these Trump-appointed justices. And you just heard about the impact. Automatic trigger laws in 13 states. I just believe that the people of America trust a woman over her own health care to make her own decisions with her doctor, with her family, not politicians. And I also think we don't want a patchwork of laws where women in Minnesota have different rights than women in Texas. And as was just pointed out by Tom, these extreme laws, 500 more are being introduced. Missouri actually had a bill introduced this last year that would allow people to sue people who help people to go to another state if they need an abortion. And the reasoning of the court, it doesn't just set us back to the 1950s, it is the 1850s. You just heard about the laws from 1864 in Arizona, from before 1850 in Wisconsin. The women of America don't want to go backwards. They're going forwards.
Your colleague from Maine, GOP, Senator Susan Collins, says this vote is inconsistent with what Kavanaugh and Gorsuch said in their hearings, and she is disappointed. That from our reporting from Manu Raju earlier. This may be, serious buyer's remorse, but it's unreversible. So what does this tell you about how this court may address other matters, other issues that will directly impact households?
Well, of course it's concerning when in the majority opinion that Justice Alito wrote, he actually based his decision on precedent from, the 1200s, but he also added that the word abortion isn't in the Constitution. Well, it's been pointed out, woman, she is not in the Constitution, right? Woman is not in the Constitution. Contraception is not in the Constitution. Gay marriage is not in the Constitution. And then Justice Thomas takes it a step forward in his opinion and actually starts questioning those precedents. This is an extremely extreme conservative court. The answer to me, and I was listening to your fine panel before this, when Jeffrey Toobin, who's a very good analyst, but he said Democrats' choice is defense. No, I'm a football fan. I think the best defense is a good offense. And Democrats are going on offense here and asking moderate Republicans and independents to join us in states, Georgia, Nevada, New Hampshire, Arizona, Colorado, Washington State, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, North Carolina, Florida, Ohio, Missouri. Why do I bring up these states? It's going to be on the ballot because pro-choice Democratic incumbents and challengers are standing up for the right to choose. That is how you change this, Frederica. You change it at the ballot box. And you already see the peaceful protests all over the country. 80% of the public is with us. That is the answer to this extreme court that is out of touch, put in there, sadly, by our Republican colleagues and Donald Trump.
And Senator, as a result of this decision today, women are going to need support. And I know Democrats, tried to pass paid family leave as part of the Build Back Better bill. When you talk about going on the offensive, is this something your party should be looking at, trying to pass some kind of stand-alone bill in that respect?
We actually had a vote on this bill, and not one Republican joined us in upholding and codifying Roe v. Wade into law. But you're right, the women of America want their rights, but they also want paid family leave. They want us to finally do something on child care, something the Democratic Party strongly supports, preschool. All of these things are things that I believe we should do and we can do. But today, Frederica, today is about a fundamental right that has been struck down by this court. And it is on the people of America. We're asking for their help to restore this right. We cannot go backwards in this country. And we cannot have the women of the country, young women like my daughter, grow up and have less rights than their moms and their grandmas. That just can't be the America we live in. And that's what you're seeing out on the streets today.
Senator Amy Klobuchar, good to see you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on.
All right, joining us right now, Kristen Day. She is an anti-abortion advocate and executive director of Democrats for Life of America. Kristen, so good to see you. So your reaction to today's ruling?
I never thought I would see this in my lifetime, see Roe v. Wade be overturned. We're very excited about the decision today.
And why?
This gives us an opportunity to, go back to the states and see how we can really do more to focus on what women really need. A lot of women who seek abortion don't want one. And the focus has been so much on should abortion be legal or illegal, and not enough attention has been paid to what women do want, and they want to have the support to carry their child to term. They don't want to have abortions. So, each state is going to have their individual challenges to try to support women. We have states like New York and New Jersey who will have abortion legal up to 9 months, but they also have very high abortion rates in their states. So the challenge there is to try to lower the rate. And in the states where they will limit abortion to 8 weeks, they have to do a better job of making sure that those women post 8 weeks have the support to carry their child to term.
And what is your argument or your response to women who say they want more rights, more protections, not less?
When you talk to women who are seeking abortion, they don't want abortion, especially in these states with high abortion rates. When you talk to women in the Black and brown community who are overrepresented in the abortion numbers, they don't want abortion. They want the opportunity to parent. So, most of the women who seek abortion are low income. And what we're telling women, low income women, is abortion is your best option. Now is the time to reframe that and say, you know what? We're going to make a concerted effort to make sure that all women have the opportunity to parent, because abortion is still going to be legal in plenty of states.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
We need to focus in on those states and give women real choice.
Are you also disputing that 80% of Americans do believe that women should have the choice, the right to choose?
I think the numbers, it depends on how you ask the question, and it depends on, where you place the limitation on abortion. When you look at polls, a majority of Americans do support a limitation at 12 weeks. And that number goes down as you go further in the abortion, 20 weeks or late-term abortions. Fewer women and men support later-term abortions. And the trend has been to go extreme on abortion and deregulating abortion and making it less safe for women in some of the blue states that we were fighting back against, such as New Jersey. So we just really need to get our house back in order and say, okay, what can we do for women? How can we make sure, if abortion is legal in these states, how can we make sure that it is at least safe for women still? By bringing back regulation, health and safety regulations, and making sure there are inspections of abortion clinics to make sure that the women are at least safe. making sure that women do get ultrasounds to make sure that's not an ectopic pregnancy before an abortion. So I think we need to refocus on supporting women, compassion toward women, and providing opportunity for women to carry their children to term in these states with high abortion rates.
All right, Kristen Day, we're going to leave it there for now. Thank you so much. We have this breaking news in. The U.S. House has just passed the historic bipartisan gun reform bill.
Vote, the yeas are 234. The nays are 193. The motion is adopted. Without objection, a motion to reconsider is laid upon the table. The motion is adopted.
All right, the only thing it needs now is President Biden's signature. CNN's Jessica Dean is on Capitol Hill. So, Jessica, 15 Republican senators supported this bill. Did any Republicans in the House?
Yeah, we saw 14 House Republicans, Frederica, supporting this bill. And remember, unlike the Senate, where Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell was in favor of this legislation, in the House leadership was against this legislation and actively whipped votes on that, encouraging House GOP members to vote against it. So those 14 Republican House members, including Congresswoman Liz Cheney, Adam Kinzinger, and others, going against House leadership and supporting Democrats on this historic legislation. And Frederica, we've said it before, but I think it bears repeating that this is absolutely historic. It has been decades since Congress has done anything on gun safety legislation. So to see this go through and in this condensed time frame, they were really pushing hard to get this done before the July 4th recess, and that seemed like a pipe dream to a lot of people. But to get this done this quickly is pretty significant. And again, just touching on some of the things that this bill will do, it will close the so-called boyfriend loophole, which ensures that anyone convicted of domestic violence will not be able to get access to a gun. It also pours money into mental health, billions of dollars into mental health, school safety, community safety, among a number of things, including incentivizing red flag laws. So, Frederica, this significant legislation now passing through the House, that means it now goes to President Biden's desk for signature.
All right, Jessica Dean on Capitol Hill, thank you so much. Let's talk further about this. Quickly, Nia Malika Henderson with me now. So what a significant day, because we are talking about a day of restrictions, whether it be from Supreme Court or from Capitol Hill. From Supreme Court, restrictions on women's health, an overturning of Roe v. Wade, and from Congress now, a bipartisan effort to restrict some gun rights. So put it all into context for us today.
No, I think you're exactly right. A big, big day, 30 years in the making in terms of, in some ways, both of these decisions. If you think about the Supreme Court and the sort of battle to overturn abortion rights, that has been about a 3-decade push by conservatives. And if you think about what's happening with gun rights, it's been about 30 years since anything has been done around restricting access to guns in this country. And listen, when you think about guns, this has been, unfortunately, has come after very horrific shootings that we've seen in this country just over the last couple of weeks. And so Joe Biden will be one of the first presidents in many, many decades to sign comprehensive legislation around gun rights. So you've got the closing of the boyfriend loophole, as well as a more focus on mental health as well, and incentivizing red flag laws across the country. But listen, I think we could be entering into a period where there is kind of a rejiggering of Americans' rights. We see that, of course, with abortion. The Supreme Court are rolling back a right that women have had for 50 years, and we'll see what happens with any number of other rights, voting rights, for instance. And then if you look at what Clarence Thomas said in his opinion, this idea of scrutinizing other rights around same-sex marriage, around same-sex intimacy and just sexual intimacy more broadly, and then around contraception. So this is a fascinating period that we are entering as a country.
Right, and Nia, on guns, I think you did frame that in a much more palatable way. It's restrictions on gun access as opposed to gun rights. All right, thank you so much, Nia Malika Henderson. All right, next, a closer look at Justice Clarence Thomas's views on the Roe decision and why he thinks the court may need to revisit other high-profile cases from recent past.
Get daily news updates in your inbox. Sign up for the CNN newsletter. Coronavirus, fact versus fiction.
I'm Linda Kincaid in Atlanta, and this is CNN.
This is CNN.
The U.S. Supreme Court in a 5-4 decision has overturned Roe v. Wade, but a single line in the opinion from Justice Clarence Thomas is raising concern that reversing the precedent on abortion rights is just the beginning. Thomas argues, I'm quoting now, in future cases, we should reconsider all of the court's substantive due process precedents, including Griswold, Lawrence, and Obergefell. Because any substantive due process decision is demonstrably erroneous, we have a duty to correct the error established in those precedents. CNN senior legal analyst Laura Coates is back with us. All right, so Laura, he is not beating around the bush. Does it mean that cases about same-sex marriage or contraception could be revisited and potentially overturned?
Yes, they could be revisited. He is not mincing his words. And frankly, this is what most people, when they first saw the legal draft opinion back in May, were concerned about. The idea that that inclusion of a line by Justice Alito, this is not to suggest that other things, like what you just named, the right to have contraceptive use in marriage, the right to engage in same-sex sexual activity, the right to actually be married to a person of your same gender, same-sex marriage. All of these notions is what people thought. I guess this is the reason that Alito wanted to put in there, because he would obviously note that if the rationale is based on the fact that, hey, if there's no long-standing national tradition or history or recognition of this as an explicit right in the Constitution, then we can't recognize it here. Thomas is essentially extending beyond that and saying, now we must revisit, or we could revisit these things. He does go on, however, to say that there would still leave some answers, some questions unanswered. So just as a very basic thing, take a step back here. The question's really always been, if it's not explicitly in the Constitution, are there existing rights or amendments that might fit the bill? Is it the First Amendment or the Fourth Amendment or the Ninth Amendment, or is it a 14th Amendment? All different rights talk about some form of freedom or liberty in these issues. So he's essentially saying, if we're saying that it's not going to be covered, are there other things aside from due process in the 14th Amendment that might cover it? So there is a little bit of a leeway there to suggest that there might be other things to cover that particular, those rights. But I'm not at all optimistic, given the fact that today the Supreme Court was more than comfortable taking away a right that had 50 years worth of tradition on the books. And it's not as if, Fred, abortions in this country are going to stop, but they have cut off an avenue for safe, legal abortion in many states.
Is there anything at this juncture, given that Justice Thomas was rather blunt, right? Is there anything the White House could do to further enshrine gay marriage rights, for example, same-sex relations? Is there anything preemptively it could do just in case Justice Thomas and others follow through with his warning shot?
Well, civics will always come to pass here. We've got three co-equal branches of government, one being legislative. They are but the judiciary, whose job it is to interpret the law. So if there are laws on the books to codify the things that you do not want to continue to leave up to a court, which is increasingly becoming viewed as a political entity more than the apolitical body that it's supposed to recognize as being, then yes, codifying what you want to not be left up to judicial opinion is going to be important. But remember, the Senate has a very tough row. And I know, of course, President Biden is a creature of the Senate, but he's aware of the thing called the filibuster. And even among the Democratic caucus, there's not pure unity in all of these aspects of things. You're going to have to either get 10 more Republicans to join into an entire unified caucus to try to go against the filibuster, or try to make an exception to the filibuster in some way, a carve-out, much like they did, by the way, to raise the debt ceiling. It can be done, and it has been done recently. But aside from that, you don't really have all of the tools at one's disposal to try to undermine the court.
All right, we'll leave it there for now. Laura Coates, thanks so much. All right, and next we'll take you back to that location right there at the U.S. Supreme Court, where large crowds are gathering just hours after the Supreme Court struck down Roe v. Wade.
Sunday on CNN. In a year full of challenges, let's salute those going the extra mile, using their platforms for good. CNN Heroes Salutes, hosted by Aaron Burnett. Sunday.
Christiana Manpour.
In Amsterdam. Jerusalem.
Sarajevo, Afghanistan.
I'm Christiana Manpour in Iran. Christiana Manpour, CNN, with elements of the Galilee Division in Israel. As dusk fell, people were still marching.
Here we are in Habila, a village that has not had any food distribution since June. When the families have finished looking at the names that are posted on those boards, they come here. This is now a memorial to the victims of the Srebrenica massacre. We're very interested to see what's going on here. Mr. President, it's a privilege to address you from Sarajevo. Do you not think that the constant flip-flops of your administration on the issue of Bosnia sets a very dangerous precedent? This is a pretty shocking picture. Would you condemn President Assad for 100,000 plus deaths? You still have huge dreams. They didn't take that away from you. In a matter of 26 days, legislation was passed. I wonder whether you ever think that other countries can learn from what you did. What made you be so passionate about the environment? I saw you listening to that testimony. You look pretty broken up yourself. Does love have a chance still of winning?
I always believe that.
When you follow a story, you may be asked to take risks.
These protests are a test for Hamas.
Where Iraqi troops would pre-position and these Americans would advise them.
The protesters are just outside a military base. They're throwing rocks.
Any understanding between Israel and Gaza could quickly fall apart again.
You witness persistence, and that's where change happens.
The one thing they have in common is a determination to keep going.
I'm Julia Chatterley. I'll speak to newsmakers, risk takers, and the ultimate game changers.
First Move with Julia Chatterley, weeknights on CNN.
This is CNN.
All right, live pictures right now outside the U.S. Supreme Court on the day that the Supreme Court rendered its decision to overturn Roe versus Wade after 50 years. You can hear the crowd there. Our Whitney Wild is there in the crowd. Whitney, what are people telling you?
Well, right now, we've spoken with people on both sides of this issue. The people who are in support of this opinion are obviously elated. And now they say that the plan of action, again, this is for people who are in support of this decision, is to go state by state and try to basically block access to abortion state by state. So that's on the pro-life side of this issue. On the side who is in support of allowing access for abortion rights, there's obvious disappointment. People were crying, but now there is a huge crowd out here. So clearly people feel like there's still an action item out here. They still feel like there's something that they can do. So let me show you the size of the crowd here, which has grown substantially over the last several hours. This crowd was just a couple dozen people when this opinion came out. Now there are hundreds and hundreds of people. As you can see, law enforcement is gearing up. There are more officers now than we've seen throughout